Hey guys, GG Magic here, and I'm bringing you a comparison video between Trickster and Sab, mostly because with the new Saboteur changes there is a lot of talk of frenzy charges, damage over time, and what's better, especially for traps, and this is probably going to include things like Bladefall Trap, that includes poison, any bleed variants of attack range skills on traps, stuff like that. So really quick, I'm just going to show you right here, or let me bring up the right one. So um, what we'll talk about first is if you were to do this, what would you do? And so the main difference is that we cut out a little bit of the AoE in life in the tree so that we can grab a little more frenzy charge generation, frenzy charges, life, and a socket here. So there are options you can take that are not this. I'm not telling you this is correct, but this is kind of the only way to make it work. And if it even matters, I mean, I am level 91 on the tree, but you would reach um, optimal frenzy charge generation and a 140% life, I believe, right? Yeah, I'm around this level. Uh, you can cut out some of these other nodes, like these two. So if you're kind of looking at what this build shapes up to be around level 70, this is what it's going to be like. And then we'll just undo that stuff. So, long story short, to give you a quick run through, the Frenzy Charge tree involves the Master Sapper, which is how you regenerate Frenzy Charges. And moving forward, besides this, would be your Ascendancy node Swift Killer, which is based on kill, which can be a bit of a pain. That's why Master Trapper is somewhat required, because with this one you can gain it on Triggered Trap, which honestly, although it is only 15%, it can be done. And in the future, when we get, I believe it's Tinker Skin. When Tinker Skin comes out, that's going to be about 30% chance to get the Frenzy Charge, with additionally phasing and getting essentially Leech, which is freaking awesome. But beyond that, this is something we're definitely going to be using on both the Saboteur and the Trickster build. But in my opinion, it is a pretty solid unique, and regardless of what most people are thinking, I think with the new frenzy charges, we're going to achieve a lot of damage. So as you can see, it's 130k dot DPS, and with that, we're not even factoring in shock. And so with shock, we reach about 200k DPS damage over time, not including the ignite. And I know things like Ember Wake, which can essentially double our ignite DPS and all that great stuff, are options, but we're just going to look at this from a very distance point of view, because I don't want this to really come off as like some extremely epic spreadsheet warrior like damage over, like that's not what this is about. This is kind of a hypothetical before we go into it, to really see the main differences between the two classes. So very bare bones skeleton type build. um so yeah, like I said, 40k on hit, 130k dot DPS, and the ignite. So, and then I'll just show you super quick the normal fire trap build. Everything is exactly the same. Everything is the same here. And what you'll notice is that, of course, you'll get the blind mechanic, but it is nothing compared to Shade Form. And then beyond that, you would get 122k DPS. So, and I'm being generous with the 122k because that involves using Tinker Skin, because as you can see, there's no other way to generate frenzy charges. If we were to say, for example, remove the frenzy charges, we are literally 30,000 damage behind. So in a situation where we're talking about Saboteur, really it's a 30,000 damage like difference. So if anything, I would say that the main advantage for Sabo is going to be the quality of life, and I do have a little bit of a mock-up here. So Saboteur brings the 20% AoE, 40% trap CD, chain reaction, damage per trap, which is not a big deal because with fire trap you're only throwing a single trap. 16% trap throwing speed, trap damage, LA damage, chance to blind, and the 18% AoE we don't take because we take Master Sapper instead. So what are the important ones? Trap throwing speed and AoE are directly linked to clear speed, and so that means that that's about 38% AoE from the tree. And that is kind of a big deal, but at the end of the day, I mean, what is AoE when you're docking in damage? And it's only 30,000 damage, so we kind of have to really look at what's the difference, especially with the trap cooldown, because if that's going to be the case, it might be potentially better to run another trap if it becomes an issue for Trickster. And it's not that that's impossible, it's just, it's difficult. So, and then with Trickster, the frenzy charges, which are pretty big deal. I put 6 here because that's what you get from the tree. The 7th one is a potential corruption frenzy charge. If we get the frenzy charge at the end of, say, Act 9 or 10, that we've been missing from beta, and then an 8th one is potentially possible from, say, Dark Ray Vectors or anything of that nature. Dot damage per frenzy and power charge. So, like I show you here, frenzy and power charges, we just prick up the additional frenzies, no power charges, which makes a pretty big deal. Although it is only like, what? I'm getting four power charges. That's 20, and then like between 6 and 7 for another like 30, 35. So it's a pretty huge amount of like increased damage for frenzies. I mean, for damage over time. And remember that only skills are dots and ignite damage, so not our average hit, which is not what we focus on regardless. So yeah, just kind of something to look over. But damage over time, regen for life and mana. We do use mind over matter. We do use energy shield, and of course life is our main defense. So this is kind of a big deal. The frenzy charge obviously on kill and power charge on kill. The power charge is only for the damage over time, but it is something we get pretty much for free. And the frenzy charge, we'll be getting 3 ways. And like I told you, that is from Master Sapper, Swift Killer, and Tinkerskin. Honestly, with no money, you basically have it's easy ways to generate frenzy charges, so that's really not a big deal. Then we also have the dodge and spell dodge, and then the more damage per frenzy, which that's just the way frenzy charges work. Without frenzy charges, this build would not be worth it. And then shade form, which is a huge boon to our defenses. It's not a big deal in reality because we aren't scaling those incredibly well, but they do add up, and with, you know, energy shield on gear, it would make a big difference. So you're looking at a build with around 172% life. Oh wait, I'm sorry, 172% life is on the Saboteur version, so it's also a 12% life difference. So generally, the survivability is a slight trade-off. So where we gain that 250 energy shield, it's kind of an exchange for the 12% life. And so you'll notice that there's also no jewel sockets. So one of the main differences for jewel sockets, and this is in both builds, is that some nodes that are like 2 off here, like this is like 14% damage, and this here is another 7%, 8% damage. These 2 off nodes could be exchanged for these jewel sockets, for a jewel very similar to this one. But as you can clearly tell, it is a very similar damage to, say, for this one. So I would actually probably take that off and exchange it for this because it gives the 7% increased life. But on a budget, you'd rather just grab these damage nodes and kind of call it a day. Now this one is kind of way more damage than a jewel could get. But at the same time, you are looking at a node that could be replaced for 7% life. And so if it matters, you can actually achieve, that's 1, 2, 3 jewel sockets. This is pretty impressive on a trapper build because trappers are super starved for points. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the clever construction change. So now traps are vulnerable or invulnerable when they are triggering and when they hit the ground. And so that does make a difference because clever construction it's a necessary node for a lot of builds. But that does kind of add to the build diversity. What I am going to be doing is at the beginning of the league, I'm going to actually attempt this without clever construction. And so that's going to save us about 3 points, which in reality is going to just be used to push us in the right direction and maybe even achieve some early holy fire. or even the early Whispers of Doom. But we'll be using a power ring for the beginning of the game, just so that we can get a head start on our damage. So yeah, I mean, besides that, the changes between the two are pretty. It is a pretty serious trade-off, and we'll kind of look at it again because really Saboteur does give you a ton of clear speed in reality, and then Trickster is going to give us more damage or survivability. A lot of people are really excited over Trickster because of the changes it received, and is honestly going to be kind of like a huge segue into like probably seeing way more damage over time builds taking the Trickster. Um, but yeah, I really like what I'm looking at. I think my choice is going to be leaning more towards the Trickster, mostly because we can run since we're not getting that AoE, we can run multiple traps, which doesn't change the damage too much. So if we look at it here and say instead of taking Swift Demise, we just kind of swap in our cluster traps, or I'm sorry, let's do multiple traps. You'll notice our DPS does fall off quite a bit. So I mean, to be fair, it oh shit, that's a lot of fucking damage. Yeah. It is a huge difference. So, and you have to remember, this is not even going to be a 6 link, so even less damage. So at the end of the day, I mean, multiple traps is a huge reduction to damage. But at the same time, I think we'll be pretty okay in terms of fire trap. Just kind of wanted to go over you guys really the difference here because a lot of people were making kind of a bit of a big deal over Trickster, but I don't think it's as like crazy better than Saboteur. Um, in my opinion, I might even end up going Sab just for the AoE and for the cooldown reduction. I've even tried it in beta without the hasty reconstruct. I mean, with the hasty reconstruction and not with the chain reaction node, just to see what that cooldown feels like. And with a rhythm of clear speed, it's not so bad. But when it comes to say breaches and stuff, the burning ground really saves your ass. So I mean, in reality, the build is going to be pretty much a work in progress. I do know for a fact, you know, if we just got Choking Ash, this would be a no contest. Like, Trickster would be easily the choice because then you wouldn't need Saboteur for the AoE. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So I hope to see you guys when the league starts. And if you guys have any more questions, just let me know. I'll probably do a review on the build once it comes into fruition and Tinker Skin and all that good stuff. Hopefully some new uniques that'll give us some AoE. But thanks for watching, guys. If you have any more questions, like I said, just PM me. Later, guys.